gonna go out.
Go for it.
I'm not even gonna do the silly like video at the beginning. A little bit of technical difficulties here, but I think we're gonna power through. I think we're gonna do it. You like my new shirt? You like that?
Absolutely. Love that new shirt.
Like that? Got some
Yeah.
AFC Richmond gear on here. I'm digging it.
That's
I'm digging
fantastic.
it. How have you, as we wait for people to jump in the stream here, how have you seen any of the new Ted Lasso?
I've seen the first two, so have not seen the most recent one. Yeah.
Oh, so this is interesting. After you watch the third one, consider watching the first three again, back to back to back.
Okay.
Brandon Hunt just tweeted a few days ago that when they wrote the first three episodes of Ted Lasso for this season, they thought the first season, Apple released 3 episodes at the jump, and then the rest of the season week after week.
Right.
So they thought Apple was going to do that again. So they wrote the first 3 episodes expecting the viewer to get that experience of having all of it available on one day. So I think that helps a little bit with any disappointment you may have had with episode. I felt a little weird with episode 1, and then on episode 2, I was like, oh, okay, this is sort of getting back on track. And then now at episode 3, and then watching them all again, I was like, okay, I get it now. This is
okay. Because it is. I wouldn't say it's jarring. That's way too strong a word. But it did seem like, oh, okay, they're going a little bit different direction here, which is fine. I mean, it's the second season of a popular show. It doesn't need to be the same thing over and over again. But yeah, I see what you mean.
And then where are you on Rick and Morty?
I did watch last night's. I was awfully tired though, so I think I need to rewatch it. Anytime there are multiple Ricks, things like that, then I need Ricks or Mortys. I should try to go back and make sure I can keep track of who's who.
They really make you think sometimes.
Exactly.
With those
That's
episodes.
what makes it such a great show.
Yeah. But I do love that then they sort of make fun of the fact that you have to keep track at some points. It's
the most meta show I think that's ever been on TV.
Yeah. I think Dan Harmon, because if you look at some of the jokes, a lot of the jokes that he made in Community, I think Dan Harmon's goal in life was just to make the most meta show that's ever hit television. He tried really hard with Community, but I think he's gotten there with Rick and Morty.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mark, you and I have a couple movies here to watch. 2 that came in. I see one that came in through the form that people use, the betterlife.us/better viewing, and then one that a couple people had brought up via DM or just tweeting at me, and that is Mississippi Grind and 2 for the Money. Now I had never seen Mississippi Grind until watching it for this effort, but this would be my 3rd or 4th time seeing 2 for the Money. Okay. And I will say my opinion of 2 for the Money has changed in a unexpected way after watching it most recently. And what's really interesting, I don't know if you experience this as well, I am seeing these movies almost in a different perspective because we're watching all these movies. Like I'm seeing a little bit more than just the story itself and a little bit more about the messaging around gambling. I seem to be a little bit more sensitive to that. And that really stuck out to me in 2 for the Money. And I'm looking forward to talking about
good.
That.
Yeah, it was actually a second time for each film for me. In fact, I'm thinking back on it. All the movies that we've reviewed so far, I had seen previously. So this was a second viewing for both of these for me too. So
okay. Let's start with 2 for the Money, since that came out in 2005.
Yep.
This features Matthew McConaughey and Al Pacino, and with a cameo, if you will, with Jerry, I guess a little better than a cameo, but Jerry Piven's also in this. This was a movie that when it came out in 2005, I don't even think I was really even betting on sports by then. So it was interesting. At the time that I watched it, I just sort of assumed it was a part of my gambling life. But now then when I looked back and realized, oh, this came out before I really even got into sports betting. This is a much older movie than I guess I remembered it being.
Sure. Well, I mean, if there's even one line where Al Pacino's character says, the sports betting is illegal in 49 states, right? And so, here we are 15, 16 years later, and boy, what a different landscape.
Um, let's again, for anybody who's new to this, or if you just need to be a reminder, Mark and I go through these movies and we really just focus on the gambling portions of the movie. We're not here to talk about the story arc, character development, anything like that. We always have notes on that, of course, but the bulk
Sure.
of this is what do the gambling themes or scenes look like, and what are our thoughts on them. So let's start with how this movie begins. This is a great old tale of an athlete that can't progress his career due to injury, and he's trying to figure out life. And he finds himself at a at a 900, like a hotline. What do you call it? Like a hotline.
Yeah, it used to be those 900 numbers where you'd pay.
Yeah,
It was a hotline kind of thing. And
sure.
initially, he's just spewing out, it sounds like entertainment news. I think he was talking about like
Yeah,
Britney
Jessica
Spears at one point or
Simpson.
something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, that was it. Jessica Simpson. Yeah. And I also want to preface this to say that the movie starts, it says inspired by a true story. And they really took some liberties here. I mean, inspired, heavy on inspired. It's certainly not based on a true story. The actual story is a guy named Brandon Links who worked for a tout named Stu Finers, who is, your typical, I don't want to say scumbag because I don't know the guy, but a tout who's basically on TV, to make money, not to help you, win.
yes. So Stu Feiner is actually, since we'll start there, Stu Feiner is actually still an active
Mm.
tout, or whatever label you want to give him. He's associated with Barstool, I think, at this point. I
That
think he
sounds right to me too. Yeah.
yeah. And yes, he's one of these sort of old school touts that's been in the business for decades.
Yeah.
If you follow him on Twitter, he's a difficult follow, not because of his content, but because he often tweets in all caps. And it's just difficult to see that over and over. It's like, why is this guy yelling at me all the time? But yes, people would probably recognize Stu Feiner if they follow Barstool in any sort of capacity.
Yeah.
Brandon, who's played by Matthew McConaughey here, he fills in for someone who typically does the sports betting line, but who isn't there, so he fills it in, and he
changes the picks basically.
And he changes the picks. Yeah, he's like, he looks at the guy's picks, he hates them, he changes them, and he that's what he records for this hotline, and they do well. And of course, he catches fire. Now, something I thought was interesting about this, he ends his recording on his hotline, "Good night and good gambling."
Yep, I took that note as well. Boy, that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, I like that. That's really close to something I like to say."
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't say that. Now I'd look like a copycat.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Even though I am copying a famous journalist, but at least it's not the fictional movie. He goes to the to get paid for this endeavor, this job that he has. He goes and he gets paid, and he doesn't like how much he's getting paid, and the guy who's handing him his check or his cash, whatever, says, "If you're that good, why don't you bet your own games?" And this is a huge sticking point in any sort of pick selling, sports handicapping, whatever environment, is the person who is informing you on how you should bet actually betting themselves. And I've seen great debates on whether or not that matters. I'm curious to you, from you, Mark. If you knew someone who was decent at picking, we're not going to entertain an 80% mark like they do in this movie. But if they do, if they're good at it, would it bother you if that person didn't also bet on the games?
Yeah, I guess it would. But I want to back up and say, I don't know that I would accuse somebody, hey, why are you selling picks when you could make the bets yourself? Because I don't think that's necessarily a good argument. They could be doing both. And there's really no reason that they shouldn't be doing both unless they're worried that the line is going to shift so much by, handing out this information. Because, well, there are a lot of reasons. It's not like everybody can get down, 5 figures on a game, 6 figures on a game. If some, some of these really serious gamblers, they're just books that, aren't going to do it. And certainly back in those days when you were basically working with bookies, it's how do you get the money down?
Right.
So I kind of answered your question backwards, but I would expect them to be betting on their own as well. Yes. But just because they're selling them, I wouldn't necessarily thinking that they're not giving me information, even though in reality, maybe 95% of the touts out there, are just, making it up or whatever. So
they're salesmen, right? They're
sure,
salesmen
yeah, that's
first,
right.
and they may be better second if that's in fact what they're doing.
And that's a big theme of this movie too, is,
Yes.
even though our hero is making great picks towards the beginning of the movie, his mentor, Al Pacino, the character's name, Walter, he's emphasizing the salesmanship. Yeah.
Yep. By the way, Captain Jack's in the house. Glad you're here, Captain Jack. Glad you're here and enjoying these. I think these are a lot of fun to do, and I had a feeling a sports betting movie was going to catch the attention of some people like yourself. So I'll get to my experience with pick sellers in a bit. There's probably a better moment for it, but I thought that line like stuck out to me because that's something you hear so often in touting. Like, if you're so good at this, just bet your own games. And while I do hope that people making picks are also betting, because there's the experience of betting that I think they need to understand when they're selling to bettors. I also understand there are people like there are people who I know that sell or at one time did sell picks. I don't consider touts because they did so for the reasons that you expressed. It's, there's a cap on how much money they can get down. Therefore, to supplement part of their income, they're
Right.
sharing their knowledge, right? So,
Right.
all right. So he gets a job offer from Walter, who is played by Al Pacino, and who, like you said, is apparently based on Stu Feiner. Right away, you learn that this job is a sales job, and like you mentioned, they make this very clear in multiple scenes that the whole point of this outlet that Al Pacino's character has here is to sell to bettors, to get them to bet more money on these games, because the more the better bets, the more money they get back as compensation, or I don't know what word to even use it. I don't even know. I don't even like I guess commission maybe like
Yeah, maybe
yeah,
kickback. I don't know that
right.
they'd use that word, but
Um and I think one thing I thought was really interesting, in a few points where they really get the psychology of the average sports bettor down. Al Pacino says they all have needs. After a losing weekend, Monday morning, they have needs. They need they need the bailout game, and they talk about how Monday night's like this bailout game before you have to pay up with your bookie on Tuesday. And so I like that they understood, even in 2005. I say even like as if people weren't informed, but like I like that they understood the how the betting week worked, right? Like pay up
right.
is on settling is on Tuesday,
Is on
right? And that's
Tuesday, right.
because of the Monday night game.
Yeah, and even though you can tell that this touting service works all year round, the story takes place basically within an NFL season, or I should say a football season, because college is involved as well. So yeah, that is the emphasis, playing on the weekend, and then by Monday is when they try to make all their money back, and then they pay on Tuesday. Yep.
Walter describes the touting industry and about how it's not about booking, it's about tipping people off on the make bets. I thought they did a pretty good job of describing this. I think the one thing that if anybody watched it now for the first time, I think the idea of the kickback would be new to most bettors. I think the contemporary bettor that's familiar with touts or sports picks are thinking that it's the pay as you go service, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy your picks for today or for the Super Bowl or for the month, right? I think this idea that you invest in your tipster based on your success, I think might be lost on contemporary bettors.
Yeah, that's true. They do kind of make a point of it. There's one line that they deliver. I think, again, Walter comes up with it. He suggests that Brandon says, to the customers, I don't want your money. I want your bookie's money. And so that's kind of it kind of emphasizes the fact that they're getting some of the winnings too. It's not just that they're selling things up front; they're getting part of the winnings. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Um, when he's getting, I I think I thought it was interesting how they reiterated that Brandon doesn't bet. Right? They make it clear when he gets the
Mm-hmm.
job, then he gets the manicure. She asked, "Do you gamble?" And I think they did so right for two reasons. One, I think they wanted to make sure they contrasted him against Al Pacino as much as they could,
Yeah.
and I think they wanted to reiterate this is a guy who's only picking and selling. He's not a part of the transaction of the bet.
Yes.
So I thought, yeah, I like how they really, before they got into the heat of the movie, they really wanted you to make sure you do that.
Yeah.
His first, oh, I thought this line was great. He gives Brandon a new name, John Anthony. This is what he's gonna pick by. We've all heard the that every pick seller's got some fancy, funky new name. It's almost as bad as like 90s radio, right? Remember 90s radio hosts would always have like some like Eric Powers in the morning,
Yeah.
like
Sure. Yeah.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
sports touts almost will have the
Yeah.
same thing, like John Anthony, the $1 Million Man. He gets this new name. He begins practicing his recordings for this new hotline. Walter believes he needs to have a stronger selling voice. I think what they're trying to do here is really emphasize the sales part of this. It's still unbelievable to me. Like, look, if you had a guy who was picking 80% for anything, I don't care if there's elevator music in the background. I don't care if it takes them an hour to get to it. People are gonna call the hotline to get the picks if someone's actually picking that much. So
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Then the first part of the movie, yeah, his winning average is ridiculous. I mean, that's part of the story. Okay, fine. And it doesn't stay that way through the whole movie, but yeah, it's pretty outrageous initially. I'd be calling as well.
yeah. I love this. They're calling willing to risk what they can't afford for what they can't have.
I wrote down that line too. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and this will go. This fits into the thing that I think that I enjoyed the most about the movie after seeing it recently and for like maybe the fourth or fifth time is I really think that they got the psychology of the gambler really good in this movie.
Yeah.
As much as I may have liked or disliked the story overall, I think that's where this movie does really well, and that line speaks to that. His first week goes well. We learned he did 20-4 in college and 12-4 in the NFL, which means he picked the entire NFL slate. Um, Look, if you got a guy who's selling you every game on the NFL slate, there's a red flag.
Yeah.
I can't, I think it's hard enough when, people have to choose 5 games for the, super contest, right? I think that's got to be tough. Realistically picking all 16 games is that's a bit much.
Yeah, I've got a side note here too.
Please.
They're very careful never to mention NFL
Right.
or the team mascots. They'll do the cities, and in fact, they don't even say Super Bowl at the end. It's Super 40 for obvious reasons, right?
Yep.
They would have had to pay for the rights to say all these things, but that so it's never really the NFL. It's just pro football.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why this has changed now. Not changed, but this isn't as obvious now because sports books are making partnerships with leagues.
Right.
But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you were at the sports book, you would see big game or professional championship. It wouldn't be called the Super Bowl for the same reasons. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Um, Walter makes a bet that he later calls. So they're at dinner here. Walter makes a bet that he later calls a challenge, which I thought was interesting. That Brandon can't leave the restaurant with this beautiful girl, which is interesting because it's as the scene's going on, you think it's this friendly wager, but then as Walter speaking to his wife about the wager and about him clarifying it's a challenge, you learn it's a little more about who he is as a gambler and not so much about this about like making the friendly wager. And that's probably not something I would have caught on to the first time I'd seen it.
I do have, I do want to talk about this scene a little bit more because there are a few things. Right. Renee Russo, who plays Walter's wife, Tony is her name. She is concerned when Walter originally makes what it looks like a wager with Brandon that he cannot pick up this beautiful woman. And she's angry initially at Walter, say, "What are you doing, gambling?" You know, the first kind of indication that he's had a problem in the past. But I want to talk about the wording here and see if maybe I missed something, or maybe you can help me here. So I wrote exactly what he said down. He said, "I'll bet you 10-1 on 1,000 that you can't pick her up. 10,000 cash if you leave this restaurant with that girl." Okay, to me, that sounds like a wager where, you know, Brandon's going to have to put up $1,000. Yep. And if he leaves with the woman, Walter's going to give him $10,000, right? So a couple things. First of all, he at the beginning, Walter's kind of confident that Brandon can do this. He's kind of like saying, "Oh, you can absolutely do it," but then he's giving 10-1 that he can't. That's number one, and that's not that big a deal because maybe this is all part of Walter's plan, right? You know, he's trying to really you know, teach this guy, you know, about going for what you want, that kind of thing. So he's offering 10-1 on. But then as Brandon gets up, he says 10,000-1 cash. Something like, "Oh, I can't give that up." Well, it's not 10,000-1. It's $10,000. It's 10-1 on $1,000. Did I miss something? The way that Walter said it, 10-1 on 1,000, right? That I didn't miss anything, did I?
I don't believe so. That is what I heard. I think Matthew McConaughey. I think he. I think his line is inaccurate, and either they didn't catch it, or maybe that's on purpose to like show that he's not a gambler. Right, maybe that's I don't know. Maybe that's a weird line to show that he's not. Maybe he doesn't get the odds there, right? I don't know.
Yeah, but so I'm not really complaining about it, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Right. And again, the scene is, you know, sort of has two important meanings to it. One is, okay, there's gambling going on, and the other is that Walter is obviously kind of, you know, pushing Brandon to, you know, take this girl out. And then later in the movie, we find even more out about the scene. So
yes, we learned that they're back at headquarters. We learned that they take 10% of winning bets, or at least that's what they try to get from their bettors. I mean, what a ripoff! I mean, it's
terrible. You're having to fight the VIG first of all.
Oh my goodness!
And then
you're already laying 11-10, and now you have 10% more you have to overcome because you're paying your bookie. My goodness, not your bookie, but you're paying your tipster. The guys on the phones are insulting their customers to get larger bets. I thought it was a really amusing portrayal of the industry of just like every time we see them talking to customers, they're just berating their customers, right? On like just being, and I imagine that it was that, you know, as I was watching this, I was really thinking the dynamic between an insecure bettor and a overly confident, arrogant tout is probably that of one of a abusive father and ever yearning child looking for father's approval.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought that was actually a really interesting dynamic between Al Pacino and Matthew McConaughey, who both fit those characters, right? Of child without father looking for father's approval, father wanting to be overbearing and raise like I don't know, I can't imagine that was necessarily on purpose, but I definitely saw the parallels between the touting industry and the insecure bettors who need that, and the dynamic. So another again, I wasn't crazy about this as a gambling movie, but like there's some underlying like messaging and everything I think they did a really good job with here. We meet Jeremy Piven's character, which Psych is when he goes by. I think so. Jeremy Piven, I only gave him a little bit of a hard time for this because I didn't not Jeremy, but Jeremy Piven was in Vegas a few years ago and ended up on Gil's show randomly. Like he was in Vegas, he wanted to like do some sports show, and he ended up on Gil's show. And I don't think Gil knew that this character existed in this movie, because not like here you have an actor who just who happens to have portrayed a pick seller in the sports betting industry
Uh-huh.
randomly in your studio. You don't bring it up once. I was like, afterwards, I texted him. I was like, "So you didn't talk about Two for the Money, huh?" I feel like that was a natural key. He was like, "I had no idea." And I was like, I feel like that would have been the first conversation to have. Like,
Yeah, really.
hey, you portrayed a pick seller on in a movie.
Jeremy Piven sometimes gets a hard rap. Sometimes he's sort of the punchline to a joke, but he was actually very funny on Entourage. That was kind of his big role as the agent on Entourage.
Ari
And
Gold.
yeah, and he's good. He's the rival in this movie. He's basically Brandon's rival and sort of the villain, if you're going to pick a villain in this movie. Not counting Walter, who's kind of a villain himself. But yeah, I think he does fine. It's a very stereotypical role, but yeah, I think it's fine. I will say this: at one point, when they actually show the TV show, the touting TV show. They refer to Jeremy Piven's character. His name's Jerry. They refer to him as the Wizard of Odds.
Yes, I
And
heard that too.
this was 2005. I'm pretty sure the Wizard of Odds website was already up. Michael Shackelford, the real Wizard of Odds. So they might not have been aware of that, or they stole it, or whatever.
Does Wizard of Odds predate 2005?
I think he had some kind of website up very early, and probably didn't get as much attention as it did later on. Are you looking it up?
Yeah, according to his website copyright, Wizards of Odds Consulting has owned Wizards of Odds since 1998.
Okay, so there you go. I was pretty sure I was looking at Wizard of Odds before, 2005. So, yep.
So I wonder if Michael Shackelford was like, "Hey, I feel like there's some intellectual."
They were real careful with the NFL, but they thought,
Right.
Michael Shackelford, what's he gonna do?
What's he gonna do? Okay, what I think might be the best scene in the movie. They're at Gamblers Anonymous, and Al Pacino stands up and starts talking about how he's never it's his whatever straight meeting in up to a decade. He hasn't been to a track or casino or anything, and he goes on this really great monologue about the problem with being a gambler, and how it's not about being a problem gambler, and how it's not about the yearn for the gamble, but it's like this defect of needing to feel something, and that despair and losing and heartbreak feels more strongly than the high of winning. And every time I watch this movie, and I'll admit it's only been about 5 times. I should say I have got, I guess a better way of saying it, I have gone back to watch this scene on its own, like on YouTube or whatever, because I just think the monologue is so well written and so well delivered. And even though it ends with this punchline of him being recognized as a tout, and then him giving his business card to like problem gamblers, like, "Hey, we're hitting 80%, call us if you relapse."
Right.
The punchline should not distract from the fact that, he nailed it, right? That monologue really nails the gamblers that you see scrounging for one more bet, knowing that even when they know one more bet's not going to overcome anything that they've lost. It's, I think a lot of it is that feeling, right? Because anybody who's been in a hole before knows that it doesn't matter how many times you win, you're never going to get this relief from that high of, but as soon as you lose, you feel that, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just thought it was brilliantly done. And as someone who pays a lot of attention to the mental health side of bettors and gambling, I thought it was really well done.
I agree with you on the monologue. The scene, you can kind of anticipate where it's going. Again, this punchline that ultimately he's there to try to recruit new customers. And I think they did go too far. I think the punchline doesn't work well in the movie, because it's almost played for laughs, certainly when they're leaving. And there's certainly some comedy in this film. It's not a comedy, but there's certainly a lot of humor. But that one, it's like, these people have real problems, and he went there to make things worse for them ultimately. So Yeah, I agree. The monologue is really good and well written, and there's a lot of truth to it. But ultimately, the scene at least leaves kind of a bad taste in my mouth because of how it ends.
Sure.
Even though, like I said, you can see it coming. And, that was the whole point of the scene ultimately. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Brandon gets his first caller, first better. We learned that he's a dime better, meaning he's a dime meaning $1,000. He then talks the caller into betting the other side of the game that the caller originally liked, and talks him into betting 20 times his original amount.
yeah.
I'm sure this is hyperbole for the sake of the story and the character, but that seemed like a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not only did he talk this guy, not only did he talk this guy off of the side that he originally liked, but he gets him to like excited about betting 20x. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty novice bettor when it comes to you have to be a novice bettor. That's what I'm trying to say. You'd have to be a pretty naive bettor to think that
Yeah.
like because this guy, he admits he's like, I bet he's bet a dime a game. I bet a couple thousand a weekend. I mean, look, it doesn't matter if you're a square or a sharp. It doesn't take long for you to understand the variance of games, right?
Right. Right.
And so I kind of found it hard to believe that this like routine experience better, square or not, would all of a sudden just be like, oh, this guy knows all the answers. Yeah, I'll up my bets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind of a quick way to move the story along as opposed to being terribly realistic. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. But it's part of the story.
Yep. Yeah. Right.
And he ends up getting the we end up seeing. I don't have a note on it, so I'll mention it here. We end up seeing later that the guy like makes a buttload of money. Right? He's got a Ferrari. He's got girls looking at his Ferrari. He's got a nice suit and everything. I mean, look, sports betting's just that easy, Mark. Right? It's
Oh,
just,
I know. Hey, I
just got to
know.
find the right tout. You can be
Yeah.
a millionaire. Yeah.
Yep.
Um. I have it noted. I have it noted down here, and it's sort of touching to this. One of the things I wanted to make sure that we touched on a little bit was sort of the realities behind some of the worst parts of this movie, and of course, this being one where he's just like, "Hey, this one bet, this is all." I mean, look, we've all seen the Fail Mary, right? where where a ball just gets chucked in the air and the team that caught it wasn't the team credited with catching it, right?
Yep. Right.
I don't think it's not maybe in the 90s and early 2000s when you couldn't watch every game and you had to catch like maybe you could like mask the variance of what betting and stuff is, but I mean, I don't know if you could replicate this kind of salesmanship in 2021 with as much information is available to the average bettor. And I'm curious. I mean, Captain Jack, I know is in the comments. I'm sure he has plenty of thoughts about that. But we know that tout still exists. We know that pick selling occurs. I just don't know if this like hard salesmanship on the I've got the right answer because of who I am would really work in today's sports betting.
Yeah, I think you're right. Even though this movie is only 16 years old, the culture and the internet, our whole culture with smartphones and accessibility, even though the internet existed then, it really is a different world now. And I tend to agree with you.
Yeah. Um, I'll say here so I don't forget to say that if you are inclined to invest in someone's like insight or whatever, do your homework, learn about them. And if you're ever to make an investment on something like that, make it a long-term investment, right? Buying picks for a day, a week, a month, even one season, bad, like that. But if and what I mean by that is I subscribe to Football Outsiders to get their data, right? I support places to get both information and ideas, but they're long-term ideas, right? I'm not looking for the picks for the weekend, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right, they're doing the TV broadcast that you brought up. Jeremy Piven has the Psych system, which is a computer model. I don't remember when I watched it this time for this. I had forgotten that he was the model guy. So
I
thought it
did
was,
too. I'd forgotten that too. Yeah.
yeah, so I thought it was kind of funny that they have a quant, if you if you want to call it that, in a movie with a computer model. Another guy goes absolutely nuts about how he has a mortal like 6 mortal locks going into a weekend. And what's funny is like this is what's sad about it, Mark, as I'm watching him, like, who falls for this? And I was like, oh, there's a movie about this because people fall for this.
Yeah,
Like that's
right.
like that was the hard. That was actually that was a hard part for me to like that, like because I wanted to make fun of all of that, and then realize no, this was a movie in 2005 because there had been decades where this worked.
Yeah,
Uh,
and certainly those TV scenes are satirical,
yeah,
but they're very close to home too. I mean, how satirical really are they?
right. Um, and then Brandon as John Anthony starts talking about how he's hitting 80% and how he's a former player who knows the leagues, he knows the players, and he knows the sport of football. So something that was probably inadvertent, something that you hear from not touts necessarily, but definitely sports professional people who cover sports and like analyzing the game is like their experience with the game somehow gives them insights to the game that other people can't have.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's true to a certain degree, but we're all still watching the same game.
Yeah,
Like
right.
maybe what it feels like to one thing that the one thing I think about is when people are like, oh, I've played the game, I know it. The only thing I really think about is like in soccer, like when you see people go down, you're like, oh, that can't possibly hurt. And then someone's like, have you ever been kicked in the shin? It hurts. You're like, oh, that's a really great point. That does hurt, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I have met several people, whether it's people that have been podcasting or people have blogs or people that they sell picks, whatever, who like really lean on this like former lives of theirs where they were really into sports and how that's what gives them the edge.
Yeah.
And it's almost ignorant to a point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on this TV broadcast?
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. So something I caught this time that I don't think I'd caught the previous times I'd seen this movie, as they're walking through the city, Al Pacino's character says, "We've got Jimmy the Greek here," which I thought was actually a really good nod to sports betting and sports betting commentators.
Sure.
If anybody knows, Jimmy the Greek was Jimmy Snyder. He was on. I pulled it up, so I wouldn't mess it up. He was on CBS. It was a program called The NFL Today.
Yep.
And he was sort of the Vegas insider, right? He was
Mm-hmm.
the bookmaker who was bringing that side of the table to a broadcast. And a lot of people know him as sort of the sort of the introductory to this side, like this industry being publicly broadcasted.
Definitely.
So I thought it was a really nice nod that they included just a quick mention of Jimmy the Greek in there.
Yep.
They score the attention of a big gambler in Puerto Rico. And this whale calls these sports advisors a scam, which I loved. Like I loved that they show like this guy like sees through the bullshit, but he can't ignore the fact that this guy's extremely successful, right? And so I thought I liked that they tee him up as like clearly he knows what he's doing, but he can't deny like how successful Brandon's being. Brandon talks about how the whale can't afford to not bet more, considering how much it takes for him to feel something on a win.
Yeah.
And going on with the theme of just nailing the experience of being a gambler, that is so true. Because as I have evolved as a gambler, I have learned that the degree in which I get excited about something has also changed. It hasn't changed my approach to gambling. I still try to remain disciplined. I still apply everything I know about winning and losing and stuff like that. But I have noticed that it takes an exceptionally bigger day or an exceptionally bigger win. Not that I chase it, but it takes that for me to like feel what maybe like a fraction of that would have done the same 10 years ago.
Right. And that gets back to Pacino's monologue, too, on the other side, where, if somebody loses $20, well, they don't really feel anything.
Yeah.
It's got to hurt. And so, for somebody who's really rich, even a $10,000 bet's not going to hurt. So it's, until you get into the seven figures before the person really feels anything. Yeah.
I'll tell you the bet that I feel the most in the casino, sports betting notwithstanding, that's a whole nother conversation. But the bet that I feel the most is when I'm on the don't and I have my last don't bet out there and I see the dice tumble over and stop on that number, that's the bet that I feel the most. When I realize my last wager for the session is gone, that's when I'm like, oh,
Oh,
like I
I
feel
see. I see what you're saying. You've
right.
lost almost all your don't bets. You have one left.
One left. I nothing else in the rack. I'm not buying in for
Yeah, yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
What's on the table is what I'm done. Like and like in that last bet loses. Like that is the feel that like I feel that almost more than like a good session the other way.
Yeah, that's a great example. As somebody who has also bet the don't, I can really relate to that example. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's something it because when you're on the pass line, right? I don't know. There's something about like everybody experiencing that almost
Right.
feels like
Everybody 7 out,
sympathetic.
everybody lost.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but when you're the only one, and
Yeah.
usually that means that someone else won, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I felt
Y
that.
yeah, and you're walking away from the table. Meanwhile, everybody else has won, and they're
Yeah,
whooping up and everything. You're just crawling away with your tail between your legs.
that's exactly right. Brandon, so Brandon now has reached a point where he's like a little too hot to trot, and he lets a new salesman pick the Monday night parlay. The Monday night parlay being a classic sale that touts would give specifically for the Monday night game. It was both the side and the total. So where they might have just a side or a total for the Sunday games, the Monday night game, they definitely always gave both because everybody was looking for a bigger payout to try to dig themselves out of that hole. It ends up winning. Great.
Well, let
Um,
me ask you about that scene
okay.
because I didn't get the sense leading up to that scene that there was any reason why he would just let this salesman, make his picks because he was still doing well. Did I miss some kind of plot
So
point where there was motivation for him to do something like that?
I think what the movie was trying to tell us was he felt like he was in a can't lose status. Like
So okay, I got you.
like
Yeah.
complacency. I think they were trying to show complacency within his success.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And one more thing about that scene, I'm not sure why he did this. He asked the salesman for the salesman's mother's name and the street that he grew up on. And I thought that was going somewhere and it didn't seem to go anywhere. Did you follow that at all?
And he wrote it down.
He
That's the
wrote it
part.
down on the page where he made the picks. Yeah.
So that's where I got confused too. I thought maybe he was asking to sort of warm it up, like let me like ask him some easy questions and let me hit him with the hard one.
Yeah.
Also, who do you? But it's funny that he wrote them down. I didn't
Yeah.
understand why. What that? I assumed that he was
Okay.
asking the questions like, you know, easy one, easy two. Now here's the hard question. What team do you like?
Yeah,
But
there'd be something. Yeah.
yeah, but
Okay.
writing them down, I agree. I didn't know where that was. What
Okay.
that was for. Yeah.
Very good.
Um. They end up winning. But then Brandon starts to realize that he's being played in a way by Al Pacino or by Walter. Um, this Monday night parlay hits. Brandon goes to get his pay. It's a little less than he thought it would be. And Walter makes it very clear through a really great scene and delivery on like how he is not going to give up anything, especially if it's not John Anthony who comes to get it. Really driving home that he wants Brandon to be this character, and he wants him to like, and he's not gonna give an inch to Brandon unless he's John Anthony.
Right.
Um, so the next day, oh, then I should say that same night he goes to look for comfort. He goes and finds the woman that he picked up at the restaurant in which he won that bet to learn that the woman had been hired and the whole thing had been arranged in the first place. And
By
that's when
Walter.
by Walter,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's when Brandon starts realizing that this is all a game and that
Right.
he's kind of being played by Walter.
Yeah.
So he comes in the next day and he starts making picks for the weekend. And Walter makes a comment, "Oh, you're making picks on Tuesday for the weekend." I struggled with receiving that because I was like, I imagine from a tout's point of view, that's ridiculous, right? as a sports bettor, I was like, well, of course, right? Like if you want
Right.
to,
Take advantage of the bad lines before they
right.
move.
Yeah, like take advantage of a line that's not so inefficient, or not as efficient, and then but I think when I looked at it from a tout's point of view, I was like, that does actually make a lot of sense, right? They probably, what's the point of having these if bettors aren't calling until Saturday or Sunday morning for the games anyways, right?
Right.
Um, he ends up going 3-11. And this starts turning into the classic, once he gets emotional, he starts losing gambling story. We see it in 21. We see it in a number of different movies where it's like the person who can't do wrong gets a little emotional and now they can't win to save their lives.
Right.
He even tries to take it seriously again and still goes 2-12, which I thought was kind of a nice redemption to that, of like, okay, now he's taking it seriously again and he's still losing. And I think it kind of gave that nod of like, this doesn't last.
Yeah.
Yeah. They move on, they go to the broadcast again. He ends up firing Sykes for, I don't know, for whatever, bad conduct and just standing up for himself. And he says you couldn't pick your nose without a computer, which I thought was a funny dig on computer modeling in sports.
Yeah, and again, that's Jeremy Piven's character, that he fires.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. My man on the left looks like he loves Radiohead.
Well, that's you. You're on the left.
I guess I am on the left. Do I love Radiohead?
I guess. Do you look like?
Maybe I look like a person from them. Maybe does Radiohead also love Richmond AFC and Ted Lasso? I don't know. What do you got here? Walter's wife warns Brandon. Brandon is trying to like do better. He wants to like see, and this also feeding into Brandon wanting the approval of Walter. And she says you could win $1 million in a row and it wouldn't be enough. And again, another great sort of nod to problem gambling, right? There's never enough. Even if you kept winning, it would never be enough. And we saw that obviously in Owning Mahoney. Brandon has now lost multiple weeks in a row, and including and they're trying to overcome his bad luck with trying to like up stakes some more to try to dig them and their clients out of a hole. And he gets a call from the client who originally talked into doing 20x's bets and got him a Ferrari and stuff like that. And the guy talks about how he's wiped out, and he goes and he starts talking to, like, Brandon keeps on trying to buck back using the John Anthony character, and the bettor's like not having it. He's like, I have nothing left, right? Like there is no, like I'm out, I'm done. And he starts really calling him out on being a douchebag, right? Being a douchebag tout. And I thought it was, I like that exchange.
Sure.
Of, Brandon starting to pick up on sort of where he is now and like who he's become.
Yeah.
And the bettor is doing a great job of making that point of like, oh, now that I don't have any money, you have nothing to say.
Right.
Yeah. So Brandon decides he wants to become Brandon again. That if he just sheds this John Anthony character, he can start picking winners again. And so Walter tasked him with choosing 2 games for the playoffs, aside in a total for each, and they both lose. Still going into the poopers here with his picks. The first game ends, and I enjoy the first of those 2 games ends with the broadcaster saying, we end with a meaningless touchdown unless you live in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I thought that was great because that's very 2005. But if you listen to the broadcast now, you will just hear simply someone saying that mattered to somebody, because they know you don't have to be in Vegas necessarily, but there's plenty of people betting on the games.
Right. Yeah. They were more subtle back then. Where they would kind of, meaningless score, sort of. Yeah. They wouldn't come right out and, say that somebody was betting on it, but yeah.
Yeah. Al Michaels is
Al Michaels,
really good at pointing out the betting implications.
That's who I was thinking of too. Al Michaels. Yep.
Yep. So he's supposed to pick he's supposed to make the pick for the big game. It's Super 40, Super Bowl 40. I don't even know if they got the cities right. They get the cities right? I didn't even check. I don't think they did.
Oh, for the actual Super Bowl 40? No,
I don't think they did.
No.
He decides that he's just gonna flip a coin. He's in the bathroom. He is sick. Brandon, he's sick. He just can't. He pulls out a coin, flips the coin, and writes down New York. What I thought was actually kind of funny about this is the Super Bowl at that time in which they're probably giving out the pick, you probably could just flip a coin.
Yeah, right. Like, the line's that good. Yeah.
Yeah, the line is so efficient that you probably actually could just flip a coin and I mean you would lose on the long term on the VIG, but you'd probably win half your bets over the long term doing that. I'm not going to get into. I'll leave how it ultimately ends.
Right.
For anybody who hasn't watched it yet, I found this on Amazon Prime for any Prime Video member. So this was free to watch for a Prime Video member if you've not watched this yet. This is not a movie that I would recommend to the average gambler, but it is a movie I would recommend to sports bettors. And I wouldn't recommend it because of the sports betting content. I would recommend it for what I mentioned before. I think they really get the psychology and the behavior of gamblers, especially with Al Pacino's character, as you learn throughout the movie and towards the end on something we didn't cover, on just the defect that is inside of a problem gambler who is unwilling to acknowledge it and correct it.
Yeah. I would say, Al Pacino's almost always good, and I think he's very good in this movie. Matthew McConaughey is about as Matthew McConaughey as he's ever been in a movie, right? I mean, it's
so true.
That, all right. I mean, that swagger is there. He's playing himself, basically. Yeah.
Yep. It's true. They pulled him right out of, what was it, Dazed and Confused?
Confused.
Yeah, pulled him right out of that. They slapped another 10 years on him or how much ever, and then they were like, all right, go in there and have at it. But you're right. But yeah, Al Pacino does a great job with this. And then I forgot her name, the wife's name.
Renee Russo.
I think she did a great job as well.
She was very good. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, she played. She contrasted. She both contrasted and complimented Al Pacino really well.
No, I agree.
Very good.
I've got. A couple more things here. There was one line where Pacino and McConaughey they're walking out of their building. It might have been after the bad losses right before the Super Bowl. I'm trying to remember where the film was, but the quote is, and Pacino says this: "The dice are dancing on the table. Between now and the time they stop, that's the greatest high in the world." And so that's another, here he's talking about sports betting, but he's using a craps analogy, and I thought that was very appropriate too. One more thing. No, he's right. You're looking at that, right? Yeah. One more thing, and this is nitpicky on my part, but I kind of like looking at these nitpicky things. So again, they did a good job of not mentioning the NFL. In fact, I don't even know where this football footage came from, because the team, the uniforms, and the play. I don't know. Did they stage it? But anyway,
I imagine they hired some studio in LA to be like, hey, we need football footage, and I'm sure that they got
could be. But you see this a lot in movies. They're obviously watching the game live. You hear the announcers announcing the game live, but the action's taking place in slow motion. It's like you're watching a replay. And I think we're so used to seeing slow motion football that you don't normally even notice it, right? You think of the old NFL films where they're going in slow motion, but watch almost the whole time they're watching this Super Bowl and even the playoffs beforehand. Yeah, the action, it's obviously live, but they're going, but it's all slow motion. So
that's a good point. I didn't even think about that, but that's a great point.
Well, and like I said, I think I think it's the kind of thing that I certainly didn't notice the first time I watched it.
Right.
But again, we're so used to seeing slow motion football. If it were another sport, if it were like baseball in slow motion, I don't know if we'd notice it so much. But anyway.
Very good. Overall, how'd you like this movie after seeing it again?
I liked it well enough because I liked the acting, and it had some good moments. Some of it was kind of cliched, and again, it kind of telegraphed a lot of things that were happening. So
It was very
I'm kind of like
predictable.
you. I don't think that I would recommend it to anybody other than maybe a sports bettor, just to, you know, kind of giggle at, or, you know, oh yeah, you know, in the touts and making fun of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, this next movie we're going to talk about, Mississippi Grind, I think is much better. I assume you
Yes.
agree. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Let's get into this. Mississippi Grind. Mississippi Grind came out in 2015. And let me tell you, I mean, when I was watching this movie, the I needed to see them with a smartphone before I believed that this was set in 2015, because
Yeah.
just the way they, like, the settings and the way that the characters talk to each other and everything did not feel like a 2015 setting.
Yeah.
But eventually you see a smartphone and you're like, okay, I guess it
Yeah,
is.
it really does take place there. And I want to apologize if during this discussion I refer to it as Mississippi Stud. I've been doing it all week. I'm telling my wife, yeah, I'm going to watch Mississippi Stud. What? So Mississippi Grind. I apologize up front.
Very good. 2015. You can find this on a number of platforms through some sort of paywall, right? So
Yeah, you're not going to find it on your Netflix or your Hulu or
right.
even Prime. Yeah, you're probably going to either have to have like Showtime or pay to rent it or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I paid the $3 to rent on Amazon, but I think if you're a Showtime Plus or whatever, I think you get to, but anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you do have to get through some sort of paywall to find Mississippi Grind.
Yep.
Features Ryan Reynolds and Ben Mendelsohn. They're the two key characters here. In the same way that I enjoyed California Split, not to the same degree, but in the same way, I really enjoyed a lot of the betting nuances in this, on the way things were talked about.
Yeah, sure.
But there's definitely some errors in the gambling scenes, and I'm sure that
we'll talk about there.
Yes.
You know, now this movie is often compared to California Split, and in fact, if you watch the first 20-25 minutes, you may think, oh, this is a remake, because it starts in a poker room.
Yes.
They don't know each other. It goes to a bar. That's where they meet, and they kind of have a camaraderie. And then Jerry character, he goes back to Curtis's house, and there's a woman there, and he's waking up in the morning, he's having breakfast. And then late that day, they go to the track, and then he gets robbed in the parking lot. I mean, it's
that's a really great point. Because I thought the
yeah.
same thing in the first few scenes, but you're right. Like all the way up until them getting robbed in a parking lot, it's almost the same arc, right?
It really is. It really,
yeah.
And
really
again, if you might think now, then at that point, it kind of diverges, but yeah.
It starts with Jerry, who's played by Ben Mendelsohn. Jerry with a G, we learn. He's listening to audio tips on a CD for poker playing. It's on Poker Tells. And I can't remember what number it's starting at, but it's in like the teens, I think.
Right.
And he's learned, it's like the little nuances that you hear at a poker table. And then he walks into a casino, and it says,
yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, talking about that CD, and I'm sure you're going to mention this, it ends up playing kind of all the way throughout the movie.
Yeah.
So, we're in the teens there, and there are different, times where he's in the car either by himself or with Ryan Reynolds' character Curtis, and you're hearing more of these poker tells. And it's a real book, by the way, by Joe Navarro. He's ex-FBI, and he wrote a few books on poker tells, and this one is a real book called 200 Poker Tells. So, yeah.
Okay. Good. I wondered, and I was like, I don't even have to look because I know Mark will tell me.
Yeah.
So they walk into the Tropical Isle Casino. That is, that's the name of the casino. We see another scene that it's in Dubuque, Iowa. I can tell you that casino does not exist in Dubuque, Iowa, but there are casinos in Dubuque, Iowa. It is a gambling town. I think there's at least 2, if not 3 casinos in that little area right there. In Iowa, an underrated gambling state. Of course, it's not a destination for anybody, which is why it's underrated. But if you're in this area, you don't actually have to go too far to find a casino.
Good.
Jerry walks to the casino, and I was just thinking, I mean, it doesn't matter if the movie's good or bad or what it's about. There's something about a wonder of watching a guy walk through a casino that's just always fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like those things are just always amusing to watch.
Yeah.
It just makes me want to be there, right? Jerry buys into a poker game, and someone asked if they saw the spread on the Hawkeyes game. He responds 6 points. And I like that. I feel like that was a really great way to establish that he's a gambler beyond poker.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Curtis sits down. Curtis being played by Ryan Reynolds. And he kind of acts like a noob at first, and I guess later on we find out maybe he is a little less experienced. But he kind of acts like a noob. Like, our ace is any good? And he looks at his cards, asks, "Our ace is any good?" And then an ace comes on the river, on the flop, and he gets Jerry to fold on a bet. I thought that was interesting. Like, what? So I guess the one thing I didn't pick up on, and maybe you did Curtis do something in that hand that was mentioned on the CD prior to him coming into the casino? I don't know if you picked up on that, but they show Jerry trying to figure him out and then folds.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it was anything. Because number one, if it were a tell that Jerry had picked up on, he would have made a call instead of folding, because in the hand Jerry folds to Curtis's bet.
Right.
And then we find out in the next scene that all that Curtis had was a pair of twos. But you're talking about, is he a noob? Is he pretending? Is he just trying to, make conversation at the table? Is he trying to get under people's skin? But he does say in the next scene in the bar, "I don't have the stamina for poker." So if he's telling the truth, it's not a game that he, plays much. Even though he does say he eventually wants to go down to New Orleans to play in this high stakes game that Tony Roundtree, a friend of his.
But Tony Roundtree really got a lot of traction in this movie for we'll get to it. It was such a, in my opinion, such a bad payoff for the guy that got brought up over and over in this movie. Curtis starts talking about the disassociated persons list, which I actually, and it's a movie, or it's about Tony Roundtree, isn't it? Or maybe it's about a different character. It's about someone that Curtis claims to know. It's a story,
I think it was
about him.
Tony Roundtree also. Yeah.
But I thought that was something I don't think I've ever heard brought up in a movie before. And again,
I don't think so either.
Dissociated persons list, and if you're unaware, that is you're allowed to tell the casino, I don't want to be allowed in here anymore. And they put you on a list, and that property, and at the very least that system, possibly other casinos in either that area, to whatever network that gets pushed out in, you're not allowed in casinos anymore, right? And then it's, from what I understand, it's a pretty actually lengthy process to have that overcome. I think most properties try to do their due diligence on not letting you say, "Oh, never mind." I think you do actually have to go through a decent process to have them let you back in.
And it's going to depend on the jurisdiction. When they were mentioning it in this movie, a minor character, a poker player at the table, said, "Oh, and it's for life. When you ban yourself from the casino, it's for life." And I know that's not the case in every jurisdiction. You can do it for like short periods, and if that expires, you'd have to do it again. So
So he gets to Jerry. They move on from the scene. They end up in a bar. In step with California Split.
Yeah.
And Jerry sits down at the bar, and I should say it's probably important to note Curtis orders him a Woodford. And they don't have Woodford. They have this other, he gets some other bourbon. But then Jerry gets to this bar, and the bartender asks how he did. And I could have sworn he said he placed third, and then it paid $900. And then he orders a Woodford, and the bartender's like, "Oh, you know, there's someone else here who got a Woodford." He points over, and Curtis happens to be there in the bar with them. So Jerry and Curtis start talking to each other. And then then Jerry says that he got second. Did you catch this?
No, I'm sorry. I completely missed that. Yeah.
I may have misheard it, but I know I rewinded it when he mentioned coming in second. I didn't double check the one in third. So I wasn't sure if this was a mistake in the writing, or if they're trying to show that Jerry's trying to act like, if he's trying to like I wasn't sure if they're trying to show that Jerry wants to impress Curtis, right? And say, instead of saying he got third, he's saying he got second. I don't know. But
Yeah, I completely missed that. I'll have to go back and rewatch that scene. Yeah.
okay. He asked then Curtis, be honest, what were you holding? Talking about the scene in which Curtis jokes about having aces, and Curtis admits to just having a pair of deuces.
Right.
Now,
And go ahead.
I'm not a poker player, but I mean, I don't remember what else was on the flop, but like, unless Jerry doesn't talk about what he had. I don't remember. And
No.
so I still think it was a good fold. like when I feel like, again, I'm not a poker player. I'm not here to assess the hand, but as the recreational player that I am, unless he had a pair or had an ace himself, I don't think it was a bad fold.
Yeah, probably not. And so, Jerry just met this guy. He doesn't have a read on him yet. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad fold. Especially early on in a tournament with people when you're trying to get a feel for the table and an ace comes on the flop and you don't have an ace.
Right.
Sure, that's fine.
I know that the only reason I say it is I know they were trying to convey that, like, oh, Curtis got one over on him, and I was like, I actually don't think it was like, I still think this hand would have played out that way, right?
Well, yeah, you're right. But in the scene where they are talking about the hand in the bar, Curtis or Jerry says, "Oh, I'm surprised you had deuces. I'm usually pretty good at reading people." Even though, yeah, he had just met him, but he was surprised. He said, "Oh, I'm pretty good at reading people." And Curtis says, "Oh, well, the reason you couldn't read me is because I don't care about winning." And, that's kind of an important fact. Let me put it another way. A lot of poker players will say that it's important not to care about money.
Right.
They care about winning. But if they don't care about money, they're going to be a better player. That's not true for every poker player, but you do hear that repeated by a lot of poker players, is the money doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. They ended up again in line with California split. He crashed. Jerry crashes at Curtis's place. They wake up. They go to the dog track. And they bet on Dynamic Rainbow because Rainbow had been mentioned a couple of times in prior scenes. I'm like, hey, did you see that rainbow yesterday?
Yeah.
And so they get to the track and there's a dog named Dynamic Rainbow, and they're like, is that not our dog? I'm sorry, they're both not on the track yet. Curtis is at the track. Not Curtis.
And Jerry's driving there, Curtis, talking to him on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Curtis is at the track and he's talking to him, and he's baiting him to come by saying Dynamic Rainbow 48-1 odds. Is that not our dog? And Jerry, very much in step with California split, drops his job to run out to the track to gamble. And he says, put down 200 to place for me. So what place would be? Is it second or third? I show is third, right?
Yeah, right. So if you bet a horse to place, you'll get paid if the horse comes in first or second. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so they get to the track. The dog wins, and Jerry is disappointed that he only had the dog to place, which I mean wasn't 48-1, but I imagine had to be a pretty good payout at $200, right?
Yeah.
Probably was still a decent payout. Something I kind of wish they would have acknowledged in that moment. Because they kind of make it seem like Jerry, like that, or that Jerry didn't like. He still won a decent amount of money.
And I think Curtis does say, "Hey, we just won a lot," but but the scene is very important from a gambler's standpoint, because we've all been there where it's like, why didn't I bet it to win? I would have won so much more money, right? I played it safe. I bet him to show or to place. And, he was, we knew he was going to win. And it's that regret, even though it's a win. And we talk about this on our show sometimes too. Just revel in the win. Enjoy the win. Don't be mad that you could have won more. Be glad that you won as much as you did.
So, yeah, so there's definitely a huge lesson, right, in that scene
Yeah.
of, and I think Curtis even says it doesn't get any better than this. Like,
Yeah.
I think that was such a huge line. Like, it's so easy to think, especially as gamblers, whether it's a big win at the craps table, big sports bet, when you've peaked, you have to remember, like, it doesn't, like, this isn't momentum, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right. Right.
like this
Right.
is like, it may not get better than this, right? And so let's like take our winnings and go have a fun time.
Yep.
So I thought that was so then they make a silly bet between each other. If the next person who comes out of the bathroom is wearing glasses, they'll stay for another race. If not, they'll leave. Guy comes out, he has glasses. It immediately cuts to them at the bar. I mean, you can tell the looks on their faces that they lost
They shouldn't have stayed.
the
Yeah.
next bet. And this was such a great exchange. I tweeted this.
Yeah. I saw.
Never bet on a dog named after a disabled president. Oh, I thought it was Teddy. Roland Roosevelt? Roland Roosevelt?
Roland Roosevelt. It was
Clearly about
definitely not Teddy. It was
definitely.
FDR.
That's right.
Yeah.
So as they're about to get into a pool game. And Curtis like offers to stake $20 to see Jerry play these guys in pool. And Jerry's like, oh, I don't like, you're wasting $20. And he's like, no, I'm paying $20 to see you embarrass yourself. Like, it's a fun little exchange. And then they start up as he's he decides he's going to do it. And as you're setting up the game, they're upping the stakes just between the two of them, not between,
Yeah.
like, the other pool players aren't saying anything.
Mm.
And they're saying, oh, $50. Okay, make it 100. Right. And then finally he says, make it 1,000. I think is what the last number
Yeah.
is.
1,000. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the guys are like, I think it's time for you guys to go. You're clearly not like,
I love that. That's the ending of the scene. Is these
right.
guys don't get hustled. They say, "Hey, you don't belong here," and they virtually kick them out of the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Very good exchange there. So this was something. I guess it's a little more confirmed later, but Jerry has a meeting at a cafe, and it's a decent exchange until you realize that Jerry owes this woman money.
Right.
And at first, I was like, "Is this his bookie?" Like, I was having a really hard time. Is
Well,
she a
okay,
loan
this is
shark? Like,
this is this is a great scene, and the woman is played by Alfre Woodard, one of my all-time favorites. She's always excellent in everything she's in. And yeah, when you sit down, you're thinking, okay, is this a parole officer?
Yeah.
Is this a GA, a Gamblers Anonymous sponsor?
Yes. That's the first thing I thought. I thought it was a
Yeah,
Gambling Anonymous sponsor.
she's asking these questions, and then over the course of the conversation, you realize, oh, he owes her money.
Yeah.
And yes, I think it's his bookie.
Okay.
And she later talks about sending over some muscle basically to collect. But that's the feeling that I got. Yeah. And it's a great surprise because again, the fact that she's a woman and it's a conversation where she seems like she's being helpful at first.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, throws you off. So then, at the end of it, it's like, oh, okay.
I think it's, I enjoyed that relationship more so than some of the, I wasn't around in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s where I'm sure a bookie just did send someone to like break your legs until you paid money.
Yeah, right.
But I actually I appreciated the 2015 realistic of like, look, we're like, people have cameras on their phones, right? We can't just send people to start roughing people up.
Yeah,
we
right.
have to like negotiate, right?
Yeah.
And negotiation starts with, disarming people by being nice to them and stuff like that. So I did appreciate that was the approach, and that it only gets a little worse from there. But like, it's like, clearly she can't just start like threatening him right off the bat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Jerry calls Curtis, and Curtis admits, I won tickets to the Bulls game playing dice this morning. So someone on Twitter was like, hey, I love this movie. Someone has said the gambling isn't accurate, but I haven't seen it. And there's a couple parts where I did notice where there was some really weird gambling moments. But this is one where I thought was Curtis playing street dice?
I
Like,
mean, he had to have been,
it
right?
had to have been, right? Like,
Yeah, sure.
there's no way he could have won this in a casino.
Sure.
And so I just the character of Curtis is so mysterious in this movie, and this this notion that he won a ticket to a Bulls game and a dice game, which clearly had to have been a street dice game, only lends itself to that even more. Um After a monologue on wanting to hit home games and casinos going down the Mississippi River, Curtis calls out Jerry and asks how much he owes. It's very clear. Um, like we say, Curtis has been talking about this big home game in New Orleans put on by Teddy and
Tony.
Tony, and Jerry wants a part of it. And they start talking and they start hyping this up. And Jerry, like, oh, let's, we hit every home game. I'm in a casino. And then Curtis just flat out asks him, how much do you owe? He sees right through it. And
Yeah, sure.
I like that I like that they're showing that Curtis this isn't his first rodeo around gamblers, right?
Yeah,
like he
right.
picked up on and and the answer was really the answer was really heavy in a way. He was like, a lot to everyone, right? And it is just
Yeah, to everyone, yeah.
to everyone, right? And it's one because I think where that resonates with people is, look, not everybody's a problem gambler, thank goodness, and not everybody but I think that we all sort of experience moments in our lives where it's not just this one problem we have to fix. It just kind of feels like it's everywhere. And like, and how just the despair and the willingness to just sort of throw our hands up and wish we could just get away from it all is real, right? And so I think for him as a gambler who owes everybody money, it's let's hit the road and see if we can, gamble our way to winnings. For other people, it may be problems in multiple facets of your life, and you just want to take a vacation or whatever.
Yeah, right. It's getting away from your problems. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. So I appreciated that. So Curtis decides that he's going to stake Jerry $2,000 so long as Jerry drives. Curtis is not into the CD on the 200 poker tells that is going on. He's not interested in hearing this CD. I don't remember what numbers they're on, but as you mentioned earlier, it has progressed.
Yeah.
Right. Every time that Jerry gets into his car and you hear this audio, the CD in the background, you hear a later number. So it's clearly he's getting through the material.
Yeah.
They walk into a boat casino in St. Louis. Curtis tips the piano man, which I really liked. I like that they show Curtis tipping the piano man there. Jerry buys into a poker game. He's in a hand with king 4 and catches a king on the flop. He bets, he gets raised, and he calls.
He also has a flush draw. So his king 4 are suited spades, and there's a king on the flop and 2 spades. So he's got top pair, not a very good kicker, and he also has a second nut flush draw.
Okay, there we go. He then checks and calls on the turn and river.
Yes.
And when he calls on the river, his opponent mucks his hand.
Yeah.
Without Jerry showing him his hands.
Right.
What? This is a mistake, right?
No, that'll happen.
I guess not. Okay.
Yeah, you'll see that. Sure. The guy was obviously bluffing. Probably he probably had a flush draw himself, and he didn't get there. And so he was trying to take one last shot at the pot, bluffed, got called.
Interesting.
Yeah, you see that, sure.
Okay, so without even confirmation that you've been beat, you assume you were so far behind that you'd rather muck than have any sort of showdown to prove that you've lost.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. There are some people who do that. Yeah, sure.
That shows my novice there.
Okay.
As being a poker player, this was actually the one mistake that I thought that I saw.
Oh,
so
okay, good, because I was thinking I didn't see a lot of mistakes. So okay, good.
This is a mistake I thought I saw. That makes sense. I can see, because I've definitely been in poker. I've seen where like someone shows and then you've been beat, so you muck. I don't think I've ever seen someone so certain that they've lost a hand without any cards being shown that they've mucked before there was ever one card exposed.
I mean, you see that a lot. I recommend to almost every poker player to show your cards regardless.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who say, well, I don't want this guy to know. I obviously lost. I was bluffing here at the end. I was taking a shot at it.
Right.
And I don't want him to know how I play. I don't want
Right.
him, even though he knows I bluffed, I don't want him to see the cards that I was playing up until the river. Yeah,
So
you see that a lot.
Oh, interesting. So the chance that he even has a better hand is not worth the information that he's giving to it.
That's what he's thinking, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. Well, there we go. I learned something new today, Mark.
Very good.
Yes. Well, if I'm ever in a poker game, I'd be like, I learned this on Mississippi Grind. Go ahead, flick my cards away. You're gonna be like, who's this weirdo?
Like,
yeah.
What?
Good. Well, that was. I think that might be the only one I have noted.
Okay.
Okay. You know what? I forgot to bring up the notes on this, but they let me there we go. Jerry starts telling Curtis, they're back in a bar. Jerry starts telling him about how John Montague, 4th Earl of Sandwich, was a avid gambler, and that he was so consumed or so busy gambling at the tables, he would forget to eat, and so he would ask his servants or other people if they could just put some meat between bread and bring me this food, and then that's how a sandwich ended up getting its name.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I just love that the story of the sandwich has a gambling tie.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
Because I love gambling and I love sandwiches.
That's exactly right.
Me too.
That's exactly right. They're in the car headed towards Memphis. Curtis tells Jerry that his tell is slouching, which I thought was interesting. Would you have you ever told your friends what their tell is?
No, but we have such a friendly game that I don't even think in terms of tells that I'm not going to call attention to. I don't even consciously think about it, again, because it's a friendly game, so I'm not going in there with a real gung-ho attitude, right? I want to win, but I'm not thinking I want to destroy these guys. Right. And we all play with each other each week, so we know how they play, even though it might not be he's blinking or he's fidgeting his feet. I just personally don't look at that stuff because I know how everybody plays, and I just play them how I know.
Yeah. Okay. They play a little game on Jerry bets that he can guess Curtis's age. He guesses 35. It's right. Then he admits that he saw his driver's license earlier. It's a fun little game to play with your friends, right?
Yeah, right. Get their wallet when they're not looking.
Exactly. Learn some information about them and then bet them that you know that information. They end up at the Southland Park Casino and Racetrack in Memphis. By the way, Memphis is a cool town. I actually have that note here. It was the first thing I wrote when I was there at Memphis. Really great ribs. Get it dry. Get a dry rub.
Like a dry rub on, yeah.
Yeah, ribs. Memphis, very cool town, and they do dry rub ribs really well. They end up finding a home game. Jerry gets ace jack and gets top 2 pair. I mean, you describe it. You can describe the scene, the poker scene.
Yeah, that's it. He's got ace jack and comes ace jack something on the flop. And he bets and he gets called by another player, and then a jack comes on the turn. So, he's got a full house, jack's full of aces, and an ace comes on the turn. This is extremely important. An ace comes on the turn. So he has a full house. Ace is full of jacks, which is the nuts at that point. Nobody can have a better hand. Somebody could have the exact same hand, but he's got the absolute nuts with aces full of jacks. So the other player, she goes all in. And, of course, Jerry immediately calls. And they turn over the hands. And she kind of moans like, oh, man, you had it. And then, of course, you can kind of see it coming. The river is a queen, giving her a higher full house. Ace is full of queens, and he loses the hand. And I think it's great. I love this home game because it seemed very realistic to me. And the woman even says, oh, Jerry, I'm so sorry. I didn't deserve that. We've been on that side, where it's like, oh, you had me crushed. and I, sucked out on you, and I'm so sorry. But that is poker. So he basically loses the entire bankroll that he and Curtis had. Yep.
So Jerry starts going on tilt, and he immediately starts getting like money from people. And another indication this is a great home game. They're like, just let it go, like it's done, right? Like
You had a
they
bad beat, leave.
right,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they cut
Steve up. Yeah.
with the way the sequence goes. It kind of almost makes it seem like they shut the game down when that hand was over. Like,
Yeah,
like after he sort of goes on tilt, it kind of like everybody kind of starts leaving, almost as if like, okay, now's a good time to wrap this up.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Um, Jerry then goes to Jerry then goes back to Curtis and tells the story as if he needed the queen.
Yeah, like
Uh,
he was the one who sucked out. Yeah, and that he had a
yeah.
big hand. Yep.
Which was which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
They do some traveling around, and they end up in Tunica. Um, and Curtis is pretty sure that he's going to get a comp there that they can't get because the player's card and his action is too far in the past. They end up in the bathroom and of this casino in Tunica, and Jerry admits that the story with the queen was the other way around. That
Right.
he's the one who lost the money. He got sucked out on, and Curtis has such a great line here. This story doesn't have a happy ending.
Yeah.
And it was so perfectly delivered in that moment of like, there is no like, this doesn't turn like, there's the fairy tale adventure here is over.
Yeah.
So there,
Well,
go ahead.
let's back up a little bit because there is a pretty pivotal scene after he loses the big hand at poker.
Okay.
He says when he's talking to Curtis, pretending like he won the hand, he said that he made a deal with God or something like that, that he would make things good with his ex-wife and his daughter.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons he convinces them to go to where was it? Was it somewhere
Little
in
Rock.
Little Rock, Arkansas? That's it. And uh, because that's where his ex-wife and his daughter live. And he goes there, and Curtis waits in the car, and Jerry goes in, and it's obvious that he has a very poor relationship with his ex-wife. And she basically says, okay, you should leave. And he says, can I use the restroom before I go? And what he really does is he goes into her bedroom to find cash. He knows where she keeps cash and is going to basically steal it from her. And she gets caught, or he gets caught, and she really kicks him out. And I think it's important because you see the depths that he's going to at that point, how big a hole he's gotten himself into, what he's willing to do, pretty awful things. And this is even before he admits to Curtis that he's lost all the money, like you said, that bathroom scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So they go down to New Orleans, and for sort of one last hurrah, Jerry pawns off his emergency fund, which is a bunch of like a tin of valuables like watches and baseball cards, sells his car, and they head to the track. And Jerry is convinced that Toto's Revenge is their horse, and Curtis briefly mentions, he almost like, if you don't look for it, you almost can miss it, where he says like Mississippi Grind. He mentions a horse, Mississippi Grind.
So that's
Jerry,
who we should bet on. We should bet on the favorite in this case. That's what
that's
Curtis
right.
is saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Jerry's determined, Toto's Revenge. And they end up watching the race, and you hear that Mississippi Grind wins the race. And another great line, Curtis is like, it had to end this way.
Yeah.
And I think, there's still a lot more movie to be told here, but I thought it was a really great, like, viewing this movie as a story about a problem gambler. It kind of really epitomizes every small story that a problem gambler experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like every little oomph that a problem gambler tries to put into betting, it has to end that way, right?
Yeah.
Like, what, and Oni Mahoney's a great example. even when he was 2 days of just winning, it still had to end with him losing.
Yeah. Right.
And so I appreciate it had to end this way.
Yeah.
So he split. So I only have a couple more. I actually only have 1 or 2 more notes here because I want your thoughts. Should we because there's a pretty
All right.
pivotal twist
Yeah.
here that I don't know if I want to bring it up for people who haven't seen it yet.
Well, I do want to say something. Let me step away just a moment. I got a beep here, like my PC's not plugged in, so I want to make sure I don't lose power here before. So give me 2 seconds. Entertain everybody there too.
All right, I will entertain everybody. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good evening. My name is Timothy Lawson. I host the Better Life podcast. Speaking of, I'll mention this here. I'll actually edit this out probably for Mark's not going to hear this. Now Mark can hear it. I'll edit this out for the podcast, but for the handful of viewers that are watching right now, in a couple weeks, I'll actually have Rufus Peabody on the show, who's a professional sports bettor,
nice.
and we're actually going to be talking about mental health and self-acceptance inside of betting. So,
very good. That's great.
Yeah, so that's and I thought that's kind of in line with a couple of the characters we see in these 2 movies here.
Yeah. I know we don't want to really kind of give away the whole rest of the movie here at this point, but I think we can say some things. And if you think I'm giving away too much, let me know. But that scene at the horse track, that's basically where they part ways. So Curtis has said, "Okay, this is how it ends. I saved $200. Here's 100 for you and 100 for me." And at first Jerry's saying, "We got $200. Let's go bet." It's like, no, this is it. This is it. They part ways. You do find out moments later that apparently Curtis did bet on Mississippi Grind because he goes and he cashes out for a little over $5,000.
Okay.
So that's a little,
yes.
I don't know if that's something you wanted to leave out but I think it's important.
I'm indifferent because I almost stopped taking notes because I was like, oh, this is where the movie kind of turns and ends.
Yeah.
And then I didn't. And then 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh snap, there's still a lot of the movie left here. Like,
sure, yeah.
Yes. So you they split the $200, and then when they part ways, Curtis goes up and cashes his ticket on Mississippi Grind like he wanted to originally, like on the horse he wanted to bet originally.
Right. And shortly thereafter, he's walking around, he comes upon a street basketball game and he challenges these guys. He says, "I'll play your best player for $100. And so they play basketball and Curtis is beaten by this player. And then Curtis says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the money." And he's lying. He's got over $5,000 on him. And so they say, "What? You don't have the money?" And they start to beat him up and they get his wallet and they find the big stash. And they're like, "What's your problem, man?" And I think they take like $200 and then leave him the rest. One of the guys is saying, "Why did you take the whole thing?" But it's like, no. So did he think he deserved this? Is that why he did it? Did he think that he deserved to have this money stolen from him? Again, they were talking about the mental goings on of the gambler here.
So while this is going on, Jerry is looking for this infamous Tony to get into this home game.
Yeah.
And he finds the guy's house and it clearly becomes clear that Tony does not like Curtis, who Jerry keeps on leaning on as like his way into this game. And when Tony affirms that he does in fact know the same Curtis that they're talking about, he punches Jerry in the face, which I thought was like that. And we hear so much about this home game, and just the payoff on this is Jerry shows up and gets punched in the face.
It gets punched, and that's the end of that.
So I actually struggled a little bit with that basketball game because I wanted the same thing. I was like, what's this scene for?
Yeah. What's
it and for? I ultimately I came to the conclusion that he struggled with having the money. Like, I think he felt bad that he had the money.
Okay.
And I think he was trying to leave it up to fate on whether or not he keeps it.
And he felt bad because in a way he lied to Jerry, at the racetrack. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Because then we see he visits his mom at a bar, and his mom's singing, and he ends up leaving the cash for her anyway.
Right.
And so we see him part with the money, and I think after the movie was done, I thought about that basketball scene, and I thought, well, I think he felt bad he had it and left it up to fate on whether or not he keeps it.
Yeah.
Because after that, he just kind of goes about his life again, right? He doesn't look for
right.
another way, Jerry, on the other hand, is at the casino, like a true degenerate would be, trying to win money to get his life back, to get this
Right.
money
And
back.
that initial sequence where he's in the casino is very depressing, because you can kind of feel for him. It's like, oh my gosh, he's got hardly any money left. What's he trying to do? Right. What could possibly happen here? And, I think all of us have been in a casino when maybe we're thinking, I should just leave. Maybe not to the terrible extent that he's at that point, but it is, when it starts, it is depressing. Yeah.
Have you ever? I say this. I know the answer is yes. But like, when I saw him, I thought of, like, when I go to casinos in like the middle of the day, or I go to a low roller joint, like a local joint, like in the middle of a week at night, and you walk in and you're like, I don't want to be too judgmental, but like, this place is kind of depressing, right? Like, I feel like I'm just watching people piss away money.
Sure, it's not it's not the typical people that are there on the weekend to just have a good time.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, they're like zombies in front of the slot machines and things like that. Sure, I mean, should we just be judgmental? No, but at the same time, this is our world. We want to be a part of this world. So yeah.
I mean, look, the only reason I'm seeing them is because I'm there on a weekday at the
right.
middle of the day.
That's the thing, is like, how are you any different?
Yeah,
right, you're
exactly.
in there too, right?
Exactly. But that's what that scene kind of reminded me of, is like that moment from like, oh, that's right, this is what a casino is for people. Yeah. So the only note that I remember to write down here is he goes to the roulette table and he exchanges his 100 for chips. He puts them all on 00.
Yeah.
And the dealer asks, "Are you sure you want to put it all on 00?"
Right.
And I think she just said, "Are you sure you want to put it on 00?" Not all, just like she's confirming the 00 bet, which I thought was really funny, because like it's so funny how we view the green 0 and 00 simply because they're different colors, right? Like, if it was red 0 and black 00, we wouldn't think anything of it, right?
Or if he had put his money on anything other than 0 or 00, she probably wouldn't have said anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny how people respond to things in roulette. That's actually all the notes that I have, and I think for the most part, that's what else do you have?
Let me one more thing, and we won't give away the ending here, but Jerry does go on a bit of a heater, and he's playing blackjack, and it looks like he might be in a high limit room playing blackjack, and Curtis walks in. It's kind of a chance encounter. It's like, oh, they're back together. And at this point, Jerry has a lot of chips. Curtis just has the $100 bill still left over, and he puts it out there, and they give him a $100 chip, and he bets on the blackjack hand, and Curtis loses the $100. And no words are exchanged between Curtis and Jerry at this point. And as Curtis is getting up to leave, Jerry tosses him a $100 chip. And so Curtis sits back down, makes the bet, and then this time he wins. And as soon as he wins, he tosses Jerry the $100 chip back. I love this scene because there's no dialogue. There's this unspoken, I'm giving you a loan. Right. Oh, thanks. I bet it. I won. Here, I'm paying the loan back. I love that scene. I love it.
So I agree, because it reminds me of when I'm at a table with friends and I don't have any white chips to tip my waitress with. And I will grab a couple quickly from like Eric or someone who's right next to me, tip, and then as soon as I get white chips, pay them back. Right. Yeah. And it's not the same thing as like the loan, the payback, but it's like that comfort and trust of like quick exchange of money between gamblers. Yeah. Right. When I pull a couple chips out of Eric's rack, he knows what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Right. And like and trusted on the, again, we're just talking about a couple dollars here, but yes, I like that unspoken trust that like we're just exchanging money here, and yeah, it's nice.
So yeah, let's not give away the ending, other than to say there's no ambiguity. The film could have easily ended ambiguously, and it doesn't. In fact, you're pretty much given all the details on exactly what happened. I do have a few notes on some of the things that happened.
Please.
When they're in Tunica and they're going into it's Sam's Town. You can see from the outside. I don't think they say that inside, but they're going in, and Curtis says he's the Mo Green of Tunica, Mississippi. He's sure he's going to get a free room. He's the Mo Green. Mo Green was a character in The Godfather, kind of a Bugsy Siegel type character, and so that's what he's referring to. And when they're trying to get the free room, which they're not being given, Jerry kind of chimes in, and don't you know who he is? He's the Mel Green of Tunica, right? He doesn't even know. He says the wrong name, so that's intentional.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Another thing, and I think it's the scene right after that bathroom scene where he confesses that he lost the money. Curtis accuses Jerry of trying to lose. That is an important thing to him. A theme going back to our other movie, Two for the Money, too, right?
Yeah.
That accusation that at least with some problem gamblers, maybe that's, they're trying to lose. Even in Owning Mahoney, right? When he's up that huge amount, he bets it until he's completely broke again. So, that's one thing, too. And I think that's it. I think those are all the notes I have as well. Yep.
Okay. We got Rick Barca. Yeah, you're darn right. It's a Richmond jersey. That's right. But I don't know if I can. Hold on, let me see if I can. I don't know if you can see it. Got a customized. There you go.
Nice.
Well, yeah, and can you guess what number it is?
21.
Oh, come on. What's my favorite number at the dice table?
Oh, 7?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, number 7. By the way, I don't know if you've heard the most recent episode of The Better Life, but I thought you would appreciate the incidental that we had at the craps table where the guy a listener was with me, and he was listening on podcast.
I heard that. Yeah.
He's
700.
Yeah.
Don't you listen to the 7 Out podcast?
Yeah, he's like, I listen to he's like,
not
I
only
listen to
did he
Vinny
not
Chen's.
What's worse than saying 7 at the dice table? Actually saying 7 out at the dice table.
So the 7 out was my fault. He said that he listened to Vinny Chen's, and I was like, 7 out. I was like, oh, thankfully
great.
I wasn't on the don't, because that would have really looked suspicious. David Stubbs is in the house. Hello, sir. So I think you said at the top, of these two movies, I enjoyed Mississippi Grind more.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it more. I would say it's the better movie, sure.
Yeah, I think that it's not good enough for me to really give it a strong recommendation alongside of some of my favorite gambling movies, but I would recommend it to any gambler. I would.
Let me ask you this: would you put it as the top movie of the 2010s? Can you think of another movie that came out in the 2010s that you would recommend above Mississippi Grind? I'm putting you on the spot here, I know.
I think I actually have to say yes.
Yeah.
I think I would, without really thinking. I can't think of anything else that I liked well enough. 21 was disappointing.
Well, and that was pre-2010. So
was it really?
Yeah, yeah,
No
I know
way.
it you can't believe it, but look it up. Look it up, my friend.
21, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes. Yeah, then it has to be.
Yeah, so I think that's why it gets a lot of attention, and a lot of people say, oh, Mississippi Grind, a great gambler movie, because it's probably the best one that's come out within the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So
Wow, Batman 21 really did come out that long ago.
Yeah, yep.
Then yeah, I guess it is. And so the thing I thought about at the end of this movie, I don't know if you remember when we talked about California Split, I asked you, do you think that the character of the mysterious wandering gambler could be done in a contemporary film? And you said, well, they kind of did it in Mississippi Grind. And you're absolutely right. Ryan Reynolds' character is this mysterious gambler that just sort of seems to wander about. Yeah. I was actually even pretty confused as to what it was that he did to let himself do all this, because other than a couple of nice hits at the racetrack, we don't ever really get any evidence that he's a good gambler.
No,
right?
we don't. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So like he hits the 48-1, he hits Mississippi Grind. So we think, okay, maybe he just lives up, maybe he just happens to get a couple big scores and knows how to milk it, right?
Yeah.
Because clearly he's established that he knows how to win big and run, right? He's established that like it doesn't get better than this, right? You've won a lot, now go have fun with it, or move on. But other than that, like I was like, what is it that this guy does?
Yeah.
At least in California Split, the character there, that you see him constantly grinding, right? He's yeah. So it was funny that you brought up Mississippi Grind, because I watched it, I was like, I guess it is. And I guess what makes me when I watched that movie, when I watched California Split and asked you that question, I think I was viewing it through the eyes of a content creator. Because I was like, how could you gamble and not tell the world about it? how could you run around in casinos and not want to tweet about your every move or calling you can bet on that with your trip report? But I think they did. I think I was pleasantly surprised at how well they did that part with Ryan Reynolds, of sort of just being this guy who just sort of wanders about and makes his way around. Would you what do you think the rewatchability on this is? Because I wondered that too. I was like, I'll probably watch California Split maybe once a year after I've watched it. Like I liked it that much.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll watch Mississippi Grind again.
Because
probably because they're so similar, I only need one of them.
Okay, I'll go along with that. I do know that I enjoyed watching Mississippi Grind a second time.
Okay.
And when it is content that we're familiar with and that we kind of love, certainly we'll pick up on things on a second viewing. So I don't know that I'll watch it a third time, but as opposed to Two for the Money, I would recommend this movie to non-gamblers as well.
Yeah. So, same.
Yep.
Okay, Mark, now is the moment that I'm sure everybody's waiting for. What's next?
Oh boy, what's
next? By the way, if anybody has not picked up on this, we tell you where to watch these, that way you can watch them coming into this. But we know and assume that not everybody gets a chance to watch it, which is why we do not talk about the endings, because we don't want to spoil a movie for the sake of talking about the gambling part of a movie, right? So, so someone brought one of the suggestions we got on the Bettor viewing forum was the TV show Luck, that you and I have mentioned previously. I mentioned being disappointed by it. I can't remember. I think you were indifferent or kind of liked it a little.
I missed it.
You missed
That's the horse racing one, right? With
yes. You missed it altogether. You haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen any of them. So yeah.
So are you opposed to watching it? I know.
Oh, not at all. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 9 episodes.
Okay.
To the series, and I think that there's it's gambling, but it's also horse racing and it's also drama, right?
Yeah.
There's 9 episodes. Can you get through 9 episodes in a month?
Well, I could, but do we want to cover all 9? Having not watched it, I can't answer this question, but do we want to talk about all 9 episodes on one of our episodes?
So I was trying to think about this. I can't remember how much gambling is baked into these episodes to know if there's a lot to talk about in each episode. Okay, how about this? Well, Luck is what we're watching for the next one.
Okay. I can watch all 9 before then. I mean, regardless of whether we talk about all 9, that's fine.
Yes, let's just go off. We're gonna watch Luck. If we get through, if by episode 4 we're like, there's a lot to talk about here, we'll mention that. I'll mention it on the podcast that, hey, we're ending at episode 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever it may be. And we'll just talk about how whatever feels right, because this is I was actually kind of surprised. I thought this was going to be a faster episode because of these 2 movies, and here we are at the hour.
I know we talked a long time. Yep.
Yeah. I think Two for the Money, I thought really brought some really interesting conversations when it came to gambling and betting and stuff like that. That was past sort of the typical conversations that we have about these things. So, okay, that's what we're doing. The TV show Luck, you can find it on HBO. Mark, an hour and 47 minutes into this, and I enjoy every minute of it, sir.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for doing
this is so much fun. Yep.
Thank you everybody for watching. I will mention one more thing here for the viewers that I will take out of the podcast. I've been in contact with the marketing agency behind the new movie Card Counter. And there may or may not be an opportunity for me to talk to the gambling consultant for that movie.
Oh,
So
that would be great if
yes.
yeah. Oh, that because yeah, for those who don't know, the Card Counter is an upcoming movie that we're not really sure. This seems like there's a lot of poker involved. So we're thinking, you know, you hear the name and it's like, oh, it's blackjack. And then you see the trailer, and it's like it's more poker.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gotten some buzz, so we're hoping it's going to be good.
If I get any opportunity to talk to the writer or director, I'm going to be like, so how'd you come up with the name?
Yeah, really.
That's
I
the
mean,
only
maybe when
question
you
I
see the
have for
movie,
you.
it's obvious. I don't know, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. Anyhow, hopefully that comes to fruition. No guarantees, but that's the chatter I have going on right now.
Okay,
Mark,
great.
so great to talk to you. Thank you for joining me. Everybody, thanks for joining on the stream. We'll talk to you next time.
Okay, bye.
Oh goodness, got to hit end broadcast.